2020's been a weird year. From murder hornets, to a pandemic, to economic decline, to near wars. It's been an odd year. It has been a very odd year. But we've got video games still. So, with that weird intro, I'm never good at this kind of things, I'm going to go over my top 10 games I played in 2020. To clarify, this is games I've played in 2020, not games released in 2020, and purely my opinion. So let's get going with this. So this is a weird thing, because I'm actually kind of already getting sick of the game. But Among Us is a lot of fun, and it's well on its way to becoming a contender for the best friendship-destroying game, taking the crown off Mario Party. Yeah, I got on the hype train, and yeah, I enjoyed it, and yeah, I guess I'm looking forward to the updates, but admittedly, while I love the game, it is a bit too basic to play for long periods of time. Or, who knows, maybe I need to be more creative and, do stuff for content, or play with big people like Jacksepticeye or Alpharad, those people that are good at doing that for content. But I like it for what it is. This is entirely a nostalgic reason for being on here. The Henry Stickmin series was a collection of choose-your-own adventure games with emphasis on the fails that originally came out on Newgrounds, Rip Flash. Breaking the Bank is easily the worst considering it was just one set of choices, but this was improved in later installments, and it originally ended with Escaping the Complex, when all of a sudden, BAM! Full game featuring all installments done, since Screen Revolution's changed quite a bit in 15 years, and a final episode. It's pretty clear they went all out with the fails, and it's fitting to end the franchise. Nothing else to say, since as I mentioned, nostalgia's the main reason here. Also, this is hands down the best fail.
I'm here, combo time.
I gotcha.
You know those Minecraft Sky Factory maps? The one that puts you on a 3x3 block with very few items? Well, turn that into a game in the ocean and you have Raft. Oh, and add a shark for good measure. I enjoy Raft for a few reasons. For one, it's not a drag like those Minecraft maps, where it's so slow to get started. All the resources come to you very quickly, and this lets you get up and running pretty quickly as well. Second, the game has a story to it, one filled with intrigue, and honestly asked me a lot of questions on the cause for the world being what it is. And three, unlike a game in my other list that appears to have tried to put all the stuff in and is now working on adding more, Raft fleshes out each phase, which honestly I think is just overall better. Not to mention the game rewards you for going above and beyond, so you can spend hours getting the resources to build a big ship and make it shark-proof, which I did, and it feels like a reward for perseverance. That said, I would like some custom difficulty settings. I can't stand your inventory just vanishing, but I don't want slower hunger and thirst. It'd be nice to choose what I want, similar to games like Factorio. I was a Mega Drive kid growing up. Despite that, I didn't really have much in ways of games. Hell, I didn't even play Sonic 3 Knuckles until my teenage years, and that was on the Sonic Mega Collection. But there was one game I played once as a kid, which I remembered all the way up until I finally replayed it a few years ago. Streets of Rage 2. It was fun, and I enjoyed it. But admittedly, I wasn't super interested in 1 or 3, partially because apparently they're not as good as 2. And then Streets of Rage 4 came out. This feels like a Streets of Rage game for the modern era. Familiar enemies, strategies, but less clunky, more hectic, and the music is just... It also has a story, which is easy to follow compared to 2, but that's more down to the fact that 2 was a cartridge. Now, a lot of people say that it's a little too close to the original, but that's the point, it's a sequel. If I did have to say some bad stuff about it, the hazards are a bit unfair to dodge sometimes due to perception, but that might be me. And some of the bosses can be a little on the unfair side. Looking at you, Stage 7. Doom Eternal is not on this list because I ain't played it yet. You know what is though? Doom 2, the original. This is a fun game. Sure, I didn't add much outside of a few new enemies, but what they made up for was difficulty and length. This is a difficult game. Sure, I'm playing on the second hardest difficulty, but that doesn't mean that the game gives you much in the way of breathing space. I can imagine on the easier difficulties you can tank a bit more, but this doesn't feel like a face tanking game. It's difficult to say what I dislike about it because it's a game from the 90s. Sense of change and what was once accepted aren't. What I will say is that the game's aged fairly well, given it's a simple premise. Hell, the reboot got it simple as well, just kill demons. Also, side note, did you know that there's a hentai mod based off Doom? Can I be honest with you? I've only played 2 Ace Combat games. Ace Combat 6, which is up there on my top 360 games, and Ace Combat 7. And boy does Ace Combat 7 only just beat it. Let me make it clear that this is a really good game, but it also feels like it took a few steps back from 6. You have no squad control, any choice of objectives don't fully feel like you're adding to the stuff like 6 did, and maybe it's just my bias for Sam Riegel, but I wasn't a huge fan of Count. He looks like Chad Kroeger from Nickelback, and he's a jackass, which I don't know if Chad is one. But I love how pretty this game is, really taking advantage of the next-gen hardware. The AI feel like it's a lot better as well, especially Mr. X in his fight, since in Ace Combat 6, it was just there was a ton of UAVs to shake off the target. This is how an Ace fight should feel like, an actual one-on-one fight. Plus, it has a small free mission expansion, which not only didn't cause too much of a wrench in the story, but had its own interesting story. And that soundtrack. Apparently the artist used to do pachinko machine music, and boy was his talent wasted on those. Unless he did music for Shake, that's got good music, but I don't think he did. Not much else to say, I just really enjoy this game despite its shortcomings. Okay, a little bit of bias here, and it would be Bloodstained, but I've only played like 2 sessions of that before deciding to wait for all the DLC to come out, and clearing out a few games on my list to finish. So, hey, I figured let's try this game, which I won't do a playthrough for, and is feature complete, as far as I'm aware. Also, I was a backer, so full disclosure for this. I was interested in Iron Harvest for 2 reasons. Its Company of Heroes playstyle, and mechs. Company of Heroes is one of my favourite RTS games of all times. I really enjoy how it decides to do its own thing instead of copying StarCraft with its resource capturing mechanic. Unfortunately, games of this type are rare to find, or they decide to go a little too crazy like Men of War. Iron Harvest scratches that Company of Heroes itch, and it's really good for it. I'd love to tell you about the balance of the multiplayer, but I suck at RTS games, except against vastly inferior opponents like my friends, so I'm never going to touch the multiplayer. But I can tell you that if you like Company of Heroes, you'll probably like this one if you don't mind it being set in a fictional World War II. Really, my biggest complaint is the voice acting is okay, and the plot kind of charges forward at a breakneck pace. I mean, each campaign is only like 8 missions in length, and it's just... Look, I'm not expecting Age of Empires with 15 plus missions and 12 campaigns, but, you know, a nice 10 to balance it out, you know, just so it can slow it down a bit. Also, it has mechs. Did I mention it has mechs? Yeah, it has mechs, and they look really cool. Yeah, we always see the more modern mechs and sometimes steampunk mechs, but I don't know, there's something about the diesel punk aesthetic. Yeah, it's not really looked at too much, and that's a shame. So this year, I discovered that I'm a fan of roguelikes. The first roguelike I played was FTL, which, while fun, I didn't assume it meant I enjoyed the game. It's just one game after all. Then later, my friends were talking about a game called Risk of Rain 2. Now, I only had Risk of Rain 1, but I decided to give it a go, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. Something about the chaos and the improvising the strategy based on your character and your items, having to make do with the random items, unless you get a command, but you know, the way the characters feel, it's just a really solid game. So, firstly I was in, I got Risk of Rain 2, which goes from 2D pixels to 3D, which makes a few improvements, especially in certain areas. But to me, it also kills a decent chunk of the strategy. Plus, some of the classes I liked in 1 didn't make it through to 2, which makes me sad. Not to diss the new ones, but I miss things like the chef. Here's the thing, Risk of Rain 1 and 2 are very different games, so which one do I put on? Both. Look, it's too difficult to pick one over the other, and since I'm not a fan of putting multiple games from a series on a separate list, they're both just going to go on. They both have their good points. Risk of Rain 1 with its more strategic gameplay, unique aesthetic. Not to say 2 isn't, but a bit less so. And 2 of the characters using the extra dimension they have, harder overall difficulty, and arguably better set pieces. Either one is good outside the fact that Risk of Rain 1 uses an old IP method. Come on, guys, if Terraria can transition from joining via IP to joining via Steam, surely you can too. Speaking of, could a mod be considered cheating? Who cares? Calamity Mod. It's practically an expansion, giving tons of new monsters, items, biomes, bosses, posts, the Moon Lord, lore, NPCs. You get it, it's an amazing mod, and the developers should be proud, and maybe hired by Relogic so this can be made official. I get that there's a lot of Terraria mods now, but I think this is arguably one of the best. Base Terraria is fine, don't get me wrong, but outside of a few things from the developers, there isn't much about the lore of the world. Who are you? Where is everyone? What's this whole thing with the cultists and the Moon Lord? This game tries to combine the lore with their own stuff, like Yaren, which did make me think of Dark Souls 3's Yorn. Also, the mod massively ups the difficulty of the game. Kind of like 1.4's Master Mode, but fair. Also, it has one of the best soundtracks I've heard in the mod, which will be up for debate in the future because the main musical artists have left the project, mostly because the Calamity community is toxic. See, this is why mods can't have nice things. I'm not a huge Half-Life fan. I enjoyed all 4 of the games, Half-Life 1, 2, Episode 1, and Episode 2, but I wasn't on the Half-Life 3 hype train. Mostly because by the time I got there, the Half-Life 3 joke had been milked to death. That said, I was excited for HalfLife Alyx, despite my reservations for a VR-only game. I did forget one small thing, though. Half-Life revolutionizes gaming and sets the bar while it's at it. Half-Life 1 set the bar for storytelling with 0 cutscenes. Half-Life 2 set the bar for physics software, which Paul improved upon. And Half-Life Alyx shows the true capabilities of VR. It's a full-length game that is not a walking simulator. Its gameplay not only works perfectly for VR, but feels natural. It takes those shooting range games and makes them into an actual game. It has your trademark Half-Life storytelling. Yeah, Lone Echoes kind of did that, but it's been done in Valve's style. In addition, the game has workshop support, so people can mod the game and make levels or recreate them to the heart's content. Plus, it officially sets up Half-Life 3. And while I won't mind Half-Life 3 being VR only, I do hope it's not doing that because it's going to close the audience off. Half-Life began as a keyboard and mouse video game, and its mainline series should be there if you ask me. But Half-Life Alyx has also single-handedly done what other VR games have failed to do. It has set the bar for all future AAA games that use VR in this genre. It shows because recently EA showed off their new VR-only Medal of Honor game, in the exact same style of Half-Life Alyx. Valve clearly looked at what worked with other VR games and then shown what can be done. Is it perfect? No, there isn't much of a threat compared to previous games due to the slow gameplay. Plus, while this is a fantastic VR game, it also makes it a pretty high entry point, especially if you're aiming for a Valve Index, which I think if it didn't have such a high price range would have set the bar for the VR headsets just for the controls alone. But so much of this game is so well done and reignited the Half-Life 3 hype train, and hopefully we won't have to wait long. But this is Valve, so... And with that, that's my top 10 games of 2020. Surprisingly, I was able to get to 10 of them. But you can't get a best without the worst, so tune in next time for when I go over the worst. That's going to be fun.